Hello students, peace be upon all of you. As you can see in the title of the video, in this video we will be covering scatter plots. Now scatter plots they're graphs, right? It's a graph. A scatter plot is a graph with the x and a y, x input values and y output values. Scatter plots is a graph that has dots, just dots everywhere. That they're unconnected. Okay, they're dots everywhere that are connected. We usually use them to represent a large amount of data. Okay, use them to represent a large amount of data because they're just dots everywhere representing a large amount of data. Okay, so scatter plots are usually used to to represent a large amount of data. So let's say here we have values here. Here we have values as well. And then let's say the x here is the time you spent working. Okay, time you spent working. And the y here is how much you make. How much you make in terms of dollars, right? So the time you spent working. So if you work 3 hours, you're gonna make a small amount of money. If you work 100 hours, you're gonna make a large amount of money. All right? So going like this, right? Large amount of data, right? Large amount of data, as there's a lot of values, right? So the time you spend working, so the more time you spend working, the more you make, right? Let's have a dot here, and let's have a dot here. We'll talk about these two dots later. But now the first thing, when we look at a scatter plot, we should be able to determine if this data right here represents a positive trend, a negative trend, or no trend at all. Positive trend, negative trend, or no trend at all. Okay? Well, of course, the more time you spend working, the more money you're going to make. So, of course, it's going to go up. So, of course, it's going to be a positive trend, right? Plus, you can see it going up. If it's going this way, it's going up. If it's going that way, it's going what? Down. So, if it's going that way, it's going up. So, it's a positive trend. If it's going this way, it's going down. And so, it's a negative trend. Okay? So, for example, let's change the x and y representation. Let's say this is the time you spent shopping. Okay? And this is the time, no, not the time, the money you have left. The money you have left. You have left. Okay? Time you spent shopping, money you have left. Well, of course, the more time you're going to spend shopping, the less time you're going to the less money you're going to have. So the more time you spend shopping, the less money you're going to have. So the less time you spend shopping, the more money you're going to have. So it has to go down that way. Okay? Now, it's going down, and so it's a negative trend. So if it's going that way, positive, this way, negative. Plus, you can look at the x and the y representation. If it says time you spent shopping, if the time you spent shopping is more, you're going to have less money, and so of course it's going to be a negative trend. Okay? Now, no trend. What does no trend mean? No trend mean that your dots are just like, they're not positive or negative, they're just everywhere. They're just like this. You can't really tell if it's a positive or a negative. Right? Can you tell if it's a positive or negative? They're just everywhere. So that means there's really no trend. Okay? Negative trend, the dots are leaning towards that way. Positive trend, the dots are leaning towards that way. Depends on the X and the Y representation as well. No trend, you can't really tell if it's positive or negative. Okay? You can't really tell if it's going that way or if it's going down that way. Okay? So positive trend, negative trend, no trend. Now there's something else we need to determine by looking at a scatter plot. We need to determine if that scatter plot is linear or non-linear. So what does linear mean? Linear means it kind of represents something straight, right? Linear means a line, right? It kind of represents a line, something straight. So if we have a scatter plot here, okay? This scatter plot, it's all around this area, right? So there's something in math we call, with scatter plots specifically, we call it line of best fit. There's a lot of data. We can just draw a line to see the best to get some data that best represents what's going on, right? So if we just draw a line towards that way, we can just get some of the data on the line here. That will kind of help us represent what's going on around with the data, right? It gives the best. It's the best way to represent the data, because you can't just literally go through all the data. You just draw a line to get the numbers that best represent the data, right? And so, if you're able to draw that line, that means it's a linear scatter plot. Okay, it shows some linear correlation, right? But if you're not able to draw a line like this, let's say your data was like this, right? Say your data was going like that. Can you draw a straight line? Nope. It's gonna have to be like that, right? Is this a linear correlation? It's not a linear correlation. It's not a straight line, right? So that makes sense. But it is going up. So this is positive trend with a nonlinear correlation, right? But here we're able to draw a straight line, right? We're able to draw the line of best fit. And so this shows positive trend as well, because it's going up just like the other one. It's also going up. Positive trend with a linear correlation. Makes sense? Same thing with a negative. If it's going negative down that way and it's going that way, it's not a straight line. So it's a non-linear correlation with a negative trend. But if it's going down that way, it's negative trend, but it's a what? You can draw a line of best fit. It's a linear correlation. Negative trend was a linear correlation. No trend, there's actually no correlation, right? If there's no trend, then there's no correlation. Can you draw a line with no trend? If you can't really tell if it's going up or down, there's no trend, right? You cannot tell if it's positive or negative. So can you just draw a line like that? You see? The numbers are just far away from each other. And so there's no correlation. No linear or non-linear correlations. There's just no correlation at all because there's no trend, right? Now, the last thing we need to determine is something called outliers. How do you determine if your scatter plot has any outliers? Now, let's say I have a scatter plot with a positive trend. Okay, now we're done with the linear, non-linear. Again, if you're confused throughout this process, repeat that part again, right? Replay the video, repeat that part again. Now we have the outliers. What are the outliers? Outliers. See, I have a dot here. I told you at the beginning of the video. I'm going to talk about it later. Now, let's say this is the time you spent working. Okay? And this is the money you make. Money you make in terms of dollars. Now, of course, the more time you spend working, just like we said before, the more money you're going to make. Now, look at this. He worked a huge amount of time, but he made a small amount of money. Does that make any sense? And here, this guy he worked a small amount of time, but he made a larger amount of money. We call them the outlier. This is an outlier. Outliers are things that they have exceptions, right? They don't really belong to the rest of the data. They're just by themselves, right? There's an exception that has to do with them. Okay, that's why we call them the outlier. They're away from the rest of the data. But here we draw the line here because it's the real representation of the data. So this is a positive trend with two outliers, and it has what? Linear correlation. And those points around the line are called what? They're called clusters. They're called the points around the line. These points around the line right here are called clusters. Clusters. Okay? So, again, by looking at a scatter plot, you should be able to determine if that scatter plot has a positive trend, negative trend, or no trend. Positive trend, it's going up, or it doesn't matter how it's going up, but it's going up, right? It's going up this way. A negative trend, it's going down that way. No trend, you can't really tell if it's going up or down, right? Linear or non-linear. Linear, you're able to draw that line of best fit. You're able to draw that line of best fit throughout the data. If you have your data, you're not able to draw that line, then it's non-linear correlation. Outliers are just dots by themselves. So if your scatter plots have dots that are away from the rest of the data, then your scatter plot has outliers. Okay? I hope you found this helpful. Again, if anything is confusing or anything is unclear, I encourage that you go back to that part or replay the video. Thanks a lot for watching. I'll see you in another video.